The following is an alphabetical list of articles related to the Federative Republic of Brazil. 0 to 9. BR. Internet country code. Top-level domain for Brazil. A. Abortion in Brazil. Acre. Afro-Brazilian. Agriculture in Brazil. Alagoas. Amapa. Amazonas. Amazon rainforest. Amazon River. American Brazilian. Americas, Latin America, South America, islands of Brazil. Arab Brazilian. Argentine Brazilian. Armenian Brazilian. Asian Brazilian. Atlantic Ocean. Atlas of Brazil. Austrian Brazilian. Bahá'í Faith in Brazil. Bahia. Bahian Carnival. Bank of Brazil. Belgian Brazilian. Belo Monte Dam. Bolivians in Brazil. Brasilia, capital of Brazil since 1960 and the fourth most populous city of Brazil. Brazilian Antarctica. Brazilian art. Brazilian Carnival. Brazilian Declaration of Independence. Brazilian Federal District. Brazilian National Anthem. Brazilian painting. Brazilian people. Brazilian Portuguese. Brazilian Real. Brazilian science and technology. Brazilian sculpture. Buddhism in Brazil. Bulgarian Brazilian. Bumba meu boy. C. Caboclo. Capital punishment in Brazil. Capoeira. Caribbean Brazilian. Categories. Category. Brazil. Category. Brazilian culture. Category. Brazilian law. Category. Brazilian people. Category. Brazilian society. Category. Brazil-related lists. Category. Buildings and structures in Brazil. Category. Cinemas in Brazil. Category. Communications in Brazil. Category. Economy of Brazil. Category. Education in Brazil. Category. Environment of Brazil. Category. Geography of Brazil. Category. Government of Brazil. Category. Health in Brazil. Category. History of Brazil. Category. Images of Brazil. Category. Military of Brazil. Category. Politics of Brazil. Category. Science and technology in Brazil. Category. Sport in Brazil. Category. Transportation in Brazil. Commons. Category. Brazil. Central Bank of Brazil. Chief-Ruani. Chilean Brazilian. Chinese Brazilian. Cinema of Brazil. Climate of Brazil. Coat of arms of Brazil. Colonial Brazil. Communications in Brazil. Constitution of Brazil. Crime in Brazil. Croatian Brazilian. Cuisine of Brazil. Culture of Brazil. Czech Brazilian. D. Demographics of Brazil. Dutch Brazilian. E. Economy of Brazil. Education in Brazil. Elections in Brazil. Empire of Brazil. Energy policy of Brazil. English Brazilian. Equator. Espírito Santo. Ethanol fuel in Brazil. Ethnic groups in Brazil. European colonization of the Americas. Extreme points of Brazil. A. Flag of Brazil. Fernando de Noronha. Finnish Brazilian. Foreign relations of Brazil. French Brazilian. G. Geography of Brazil. German Brazilian. Goiás. Greek Brazilian. Guarana Antarctica. Guarani Aquifer. H. Health in Brazil. Higher education in Brazil. History of 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 the Jews in Brazil. Human rights in Brazil. Hungarian Brazilian. I. Immigration to Brazil. Indigenous peoples of Brazil. Industry in Brazil. International Organization for Standardization ISO 3166-1 Alpha 2 Country Code for Brazil. BR ISO 3166-1 Alpha 3 Country Code for Brazil. BRA ISO 3166-2 BR Region Codes for Brazil. International Rankings of Brazil. Irish Brazilian. Isabel, Princess Imperial of Brazil. Islam in Brazil. Islands of Brazil. Italian Brazilian. J. Japanese Brazilian. K. Korean Brazilian. L. Languages of Brazil. Latvian Brazilian, law enforcement in Brazil, law of Brazil, Lebanese Brazilian, LGBT rights in Brazil. Lists related to Brazil, Brazilian people, Brazilian imperial family, list of Brazilian actors, list of Brazilian architects and urbanists, list of Brazilian artists, list of Brazilian diplomats, list of Brazilian directors, list of Brazilian dramatists and playwrights, list of Brazilian entrepreneurs, list of Brazilian explorers and discoveries, list of Brazilian fashion designers, list of Brazilian film directors, list of Brazilian geologists, list of Brazilian heroes and historical figures, list of Brazilian intellectuals and thinkers, list of Brazilian journalists, list of Brazilian models, list of Brazilian monarchs, list of Brazilian musicians, list of Brazilian oligarchs, list of Brazilian painters, list of Brazilian poets, list of Brazilian politicians, list of Brazilian religious leaders, list of Brazilian scientists, list of Brazilian sports people, list of Brazilian writers, list of foreign scientists and engineers who lived in Brazil, list of people on stamps of Brazil, list of presidents of Brazil, lists of Brazilians, diplomatic missions of Brazil, line of succession to the Brazilian throne, list of amphibians in Brazil, list of Brazilian actors, list of Brazilian artists, list of Brazilian companies, list of Brazilian diplomats, list of Brazilian directors, list of Brazilian dramatists and playwrights, list of Brazilian entrepreneurs, list of Brazilian government enterprises, list of Brazilian journalists, list of Brazilian monarchs, list of Brazilian musicians, list of Brazilian oligarchs, list of Brazilian painters, list of Brazilian poets, list of Brazilian scientists, list of Brazilian songs, list of Brazilian sports people, list of Brazilian writers, list of capitals in Brazil, list of cities in Brazil, list of companies of Brazil, list of diplomatic missions in Brazil, list of favelas in Brazil, list of football clubs in Brazil, list of football stadiums in Brazil, list of futsal clubs in Brazil, list of hospitals in Brazil, list of islands of Brazil, list of largest cities in Brazil, list of ministers of natural environment of Brazil, list of mountains in Brazil, list of net channels, list of paulistas, list of people on stamps of Brazil, list of political parties in Brazil, list of presidents of Brazil, list of televangelists in Brazil, list of town tramway systems in Brazil, list of wars involving Brazil, list of women's football clubs in Brazil, municipalities of Brazil, list of municipalities in Acre, list of municipalities in Alagoas, list of municipalities in Amapa, list of municipalities in Amazonas, list of municipalities in Bahia, list of municipalities in Ceará, list of municipalities in Distrito Federal, list of municipalities in Espírito Santo, list of municipalities in Goiás, list of municipalities in Maranhão, list of municipalities in Mato Grosso, list of municipalities in Mato Grosso do Sul, list of municipalities in Minas Gerais, list of municipalities in Pará, list of municipalities in Paraíba, list of municipalities in Paraná, list of municipalities in Pernambuco, list of municipalities in Piauí, list of municipalities in Rio de Janeiro, list of municipalities in Rio Grande do Norte, list of municipalities in Rio Grande do Sul, list of municipalities in Rondônia, list of municipalities in Roraima, list of municipalities in Santa Catarina, list of municipalities in Sergipe, list of municipalities in Tocantins, timeline of Amazon history, timeline of Brazilian economic stabilization plans, topic outline of Brazil, literature of Brazil, Lithuanians in Brazil, Macedonian Brazilian, Maltese Brazilian, Maranhão, Mato Grosso do Sul, México, military of Brazil, Minas Gerais, mixed race Brazilian, municipalities of Brazil, music of Brazil, and National Congress of Brazil, North Atlantic Ocean, Northern Hemisphere and Southern Hemisphere. O. P. Palestinian Brazilian, Para, Paraguayan Brazilian, Paraíba, Parana, Pardo, Pedro I of Brazil, Pedro II of Brazil, Pernambuco, Peruvian, Piauí, Polish Brazilian, Political parties of Brazil, Politics of Brazil, Portuguese Brazilian, Portuguese colonization of the Americas, Portuguese Empire, Portuguese language, potential superpowers, President of Brazil, protected areas of Brazil, Protestantism in Brazil, provinces of Brazil, public holidays in Brazil, rebellions and revolutions in Brazil, regions of Brazil, religion in Brazil, renewable energy in Brazil, Rio de Janeiro, second most populous city of Brazil, Rio de Janeiro State, Rio Grande do Norte, Rio Grande do Sul, Rocas Atoll, Roman Catholicism in Brazil, Romanian Brazilian, Rondônia, Roraima, Russian Brazilian, St. Peter and St. Paul Archipelago, Santa Catarina, São Paulo, most populous city of Brazil, São Paulo State, Sergipe, Scandinavian Brazilian, Scottish Brazilian, scouting in Brazil, Spanish immigration to Brazil, social apartheid in Brazil, social issues in Brazil, South America life quality rankings, South America Life Quality Rankings, Economy and Finance, South America Life Quality Rankings, Law and Justice, South Temperate Zone and Tropics, Southern Cone, Southern Hemisphere and Northern Hemisphere, Sports in Brazil, States of Brazil, Supreme Electoral Court, Supreme Federal Tribunal, Swiss Brazilian, Syrian Brazilian, Timelines, Timeline of Amazon History, Timeline of Brazilian Economic Stabilization Plans, Tocantins, Topic Outline of Brazil, Tourism in Brazil, Transport in Brazil, Trindade and Martim Vaz, Tropics and South Temperate Zone, Ukrainians of Brazil, United Kingdom of Portugal, Brazil, and the Algarve, United Nations, Uruguayan Brazilian, Visa policy of Brazil, visa requirements for Brazilian citizens, water supply and sanitation in Brazil, Western Hemisphere, Wikimedia Atlas of Brazil, Wikipedia, Wiki Project Topic Outline, Drafts Topic Outline of Brazil, Wildlife of Brazil, XY